Welcome. Welcome, everyone. This is the show where we try to give you that shortcut to being, well, genuinely well-informed. We dig through the research, the articles, the notes, and we pull out the key insights from it, hopefully with a few aha moments along the way. Please subscribe to our channel. Okay, so today we're diving into something that's really shifting how we find things out. We're talking about large language models, LLMs like ChatGPT versus good old Google search. And the big question is, does the ease, the sheer efficiency of getting answers from LLMs maybe cost us something, like depth of understanding?
That's exactly it. We're looking closely at this fascinating new research paper. It's called Experimental Evidence of the Effects of Large Language Models versus Web Search on Depth of Learning by Melumad and Jin-Ho Yen. And it really gets into the nitty-gritty of how these different tools affect how deeply we actually learn.
Right, because LLMs are incredibly popular. I mean, who doesn't love asking a question and just getting a neat summary? It feels so efficient. Saves you wading through links, trying to connect the dots yourself.
It does feel efficient. And that's precisely the crux of their argument, their hypothesis. They suggest that this very ease, this lack of friction, might actually reduce how much we truly learn and how original our thoughts are afterwards. Think about how different the processes are. With web search, it's iterative, isn't it? You type a query, you look at a few sites, you gather bits here and there, you synthesize. It's active. You're guiding the exploration, making sense of it all in your head. That helps build, deeper and more unique connections. But LLMs, they do that synthesis for you. So the learning becomes more passive. You lose that active construction element.
So making things too easy might actually be bad for learning. It sounds weird, but the paper mentions this idea of desirable difficulty, like examples where people remembered things better if they had to overcome a small hurdle, like wiping away frost on a screen, or even performing better on tests when the font was harder to read, which seems completely backwards.
Exactly. It's counterintuitive, but there's a solid psychological basis. When we hit a bit of friction, when something requires more effort, our brains tend to engage more deeply. We allocate more cognitive resources. So that trial and error of web searching, figuring out what's relevant, piecing it together, that's not just annoying, it's actually a form of this beneficial difficulty.
Okay, so the prediction then was that using LLMs, because it's less effortful, would lead to shallower knowledge. And that this shallower knowledge would then impact the quality, the uniqueness of whatever you produce afterwards, like giving advice.
Precisely. And they designed a series of experiments to really test this.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical. They ran 4 experiments, right, with thousands of people.
Yeah, a total of 4,591 participants across the studies. Quite extensive.
So, experiment 1, real-world search. What did they do?
They had about 1,100 people imagine a friend asking for advice on starting a vegetable garden. Then they told them to use either ChatGPT or Google search to research it and then write out the advice for their friend.
And what happened? Did the ChatGPT users breeze through it?
They did. They spent significantly less time on the research part, about 585 seconds on average compared to over 740 seconds for the Google group.
Wow, that's like almost 3 minutes less effort.
Suggests less effort, yes. And it showed in what they reported learning. ChatGPT users said they learned fewer new things, felt less ownership over the knowledge, and even perceived the info as less comprehensive. The scores were consistently lower.
Okay, less effort in, less learning felt. Makes sense. But did it affect the actual advice they gave? That's the key bit, isn't it?
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
The people who used ChatGPT also said they put less thought and effort into crafting the advice itself. They felt less ownership over the advice they wrote, and they spent less time writing it too. And when the researchers analyzed the advice...
Let me guess. Shorter and more generic.
Exactly. The advice from the ChatGPT group was sparser, fewer words on average. It had a fewer specific facts mentioned, and critically, it was much less unique. More similar topic-wise to what the LLM might output, less semantically distinct.
So, experiment 1 paints a pretty clear picture. Easier learning tool, less effort, shallower grasp, less impressive output.
That's the initial takeaway, yes. Less effort seemed to directly translate to shallower knowledge and weaker advice.
But wait, couldn't that just be because ChatGPT at that time maybe just gave less detailed or maybe worse information than a good Google search?
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Experiment 2 was designed to address.
Yeah?
They wanted to isolate the process from the information.
How'd they do that?
Very cleverly. They had almost 2,000 participants do a simulated search, again on the vegetable garden topic. But here's the key. The actual information everyone received was identical. A 291-word summary.
Identical info. So what was the difference?
The format. One group got it as a single LLM-style block of text. The other group got the exact same information but broken up across 6 simulated linked articles, each with a slightly different style.
Ah, so same content, different presentation. What happened?
The results held up. Even with identical information, the LLM summary group spent way less time looking at it, about 84 seconds, versus over 2 minutes for the linked articles group. And they still reported learning fewer new things and feeling less ownership. Their resulting advice was, again, sparser and less unique.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating. So it's not just what you learn, but how you encounter it. The format, the interaction really matters. Passive consumption seems to be the issue.
It strongly points in that direction, yes. The active engagement seems crucial.
So it's not just ChatGPT itself, maybe.
Yeah.
What about when LLM features get built into search engines, like Google's AI overviews?
Experiment 3 looked at exactly that. They brought 250 participants into a lab. Everyone used Google, but one group used the standard search results page, clicking links. The other group was directed to focus primarily on Google's AI overview, that synthesized answer at the top, for advice on living a healthier lifestyle.
Same pattern.
Consistent results again. The AI overview group spent less time searching. They felt the information they saw was less comprehensive, and they wrote shorter, less unique advice compared to those who navigated the standard links.
So the effect persists even within the same platform, just by using the synthesized summary feature.
It seems so. It reinforces the idea that it's the passivity induced by the summary format rather than the specific platform.
Okay, this is building a strong case. But does it actually matter in the real world? Like, if I get advice based on an LLM search versus a Google search, can I tell what I care?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Does this difference in quality have downstream consequences? And that's what Experiment 4 tackled. This one was crucial.
What did they do?
They took advice written by participants in the earlier experiments, some based on ChatGPT research, some on Google research. This time the topic was buying a mattress. Then they showed pairs of these advice pieces to over 1,200 new participants. These new people didn't know how the advice was generated. They just had to read and rate them.
Blind rating. Okay. What did people think?
The results were pretty striking. The advice that originated from the LLM-based research was rated significantly lower. People found it less helpful, less informative, less effortful seeming, less trustworthy.
Less trustworthy. Wow.
Yes. And they were less likely to say they'd recommend it or actually follow that advice. When they had to choose directly between a Google source piece and a ChatGPT source piece side by side,
Which one won out?
the Google-sourced advice was picked as more helpful significantly more often. About 40% chose Google-based advice versus roughly 33% for ChatGPT-based advice.
Okay, that's huge. So it's not just a theoretical difference in learning depth. It translates into how useful and trustworthy the resulting information is perceived to be by others. That has real implications.
It really does. Across all 4 experiments, the pattern was remarkably consistent. LLMs offer this appealing efficiency, but it seems to come at the cost of learning depth, because they shift learning from being an active, effortful process to something more passive. And that impacts not just your own understanding, but the quality and utility of what you share later.
It really brings that analogy from the paper to life, doesn't it? Viewing LLM learning versus web search like being shown the answer to a math problem instead of struggling to solve it yourself.
Exactly. That struggle, that active engagement, is where the deeper learning happens.
And this connects to bigger worries about AI, right? This idea of de-skilling.
It does. There's this ongoing debate about whether relying too much on AI might erode our own abilities, our critical thinking, our reasoning skills over time. This research provides some concrete empirical evidence suggesting that, yes, by making learning more passive, these tools could potentially hinder our ability to engage in the active learning that's so vital for developing robust knowledge.
So it's not that LLMs aren't useful. They clearly are. But maybe we need to be more mindful about how and when we rely on them, especially for learning complex things.
That seems to be the key message. It's an often unnoticed risk hidden behind the convenience.
Are there caveats, though? I mean, the researchers must have acknowledged limitations, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're careful to point out a few things. One is that they didn't really look at combined use. What happens if you use an LLM for an overview, then do a deep dive with web search? That tandem approach needs more research.
Yeah, maybe that's the sweet spot.
Possibly. Another important point is motivation and skill. The benefits they saw from web search kind of assume the user is motivated and able to sift through and make sense of different sources. For really complex topics, think advanced physics or something, Maybe an LLM summary is actually more helpful for a novice learner than just throwing them into dense academic papers they can't understand yet.
Okay, so context matters. It's not a simple web search good, LLM bad situation.
Definitely not. It's nuanced. LLMs have huge potential as aids for training, for education, but the researchers stress that we need to be aware of this potential downside of over-reliance, this tendency towards passive learning, precisely because it's so easy to fall into without noticing.
Which brings us back to their final kind of provocative thought.
Yeah, one may be better off not letting ChatGPT, Google, or another LLM do the Googling.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe sometimes doing the Googling yourself the hard way is actually the better way to learn. The big takeaway seems to be about that active engagement. It makes a real difference, even if it feels like more work up front. Something for all of us, for you listening, to consider as we use these amazing tools, maybe mix in a bit more active discovery. Well, thank you for joining us for this analysis today. We really hope it gave you some food for thought. And if you are interested, please subscribe to our channel for more explorations like this.